Move to filing. You're outdated now, she said with a smirk, tapping her manicured nails on my former desk, the desk I'd occupied for 12 years. The woman standing before me, my former trainee, was now director of our newly merged 37M department, and her first official act was demoting me to the basement. I trained her for 3 years. When she arrived, fresh-faced with an expensive degree but zero practical knowledge, I took her under my wing. I shared every technique, every industry contact, every hard-won lesson from my 20 years in procurement. I vouched for her promotions, defended her mistakes, and celebrated her successes like they were my own. Then came the merger. The upper brass decided to combine our procurement division with our biggest competitors. Suddenly, 2 parallel departments needed to become one. The board wanted fresh perspectives and innovative approaches. They chose her. On merger day, she didn't even look me in the eye when announcing the new structure. My team was disbanded, my projects reassigned, and me, relegated to organizing historical purchase records in the basement filing room. The board wants someone who understands modern systems, she announced to the entire department. Someone who isn't stuck in last decade's methods. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by houseplants I barely remembered to water, wondering if she was right. Was I outdated? Was 20 years of experience worthless against youth and buzzwords? My neighbor knocked on my door with homemade stew. You look terrible, she said, placing the container on my counter. I got demoted today, by someone I trained. That's cold. What are you going to do? I sipped tea, staring at the wall. I'm not sure yet. The next morning, I reported to the basement. The light buzzed and flickered as I sorted through decades of purchasing agreements. That's when I found it. The original supplier contracts from before the merger. Contracts I had personally negotiated and renewed every 5 years. These weren't ordinary agreements. They contained exclusive volume-based discounts with our 3 largest suppliers, discounts that accounted for nearly 40% of our department's profitability. And each contract had a unique clause. They could only be transferred or renegotiated with my signature as the designated relationship manager. I quietly continued filing, saying nothing to anyone. Would you believe a forgotten signature clause could change everything? If you're enjoying this story of workplace betrayal and what happens next, tap that like button and subscribe to hear how this power play unfolds. I promise, what happens next changed my entire career trajectory. My name is Gwen Ashton. For 20 years, I'd been the backbone of procurement at Levine Industries. Not the face, never that, but the sturdy foundation everything else was built upon. I'm the person who remembers your coffee order after meeting you once, who knows your children's birthdays, who remembers which supplier representative is allergic to shellfish. I'm detail-oriented to a fault, they say. People describe me as pleasantly forgettable. Average height, average build, brown hair always pulled back, minimal makeup. I wear navy blue, charcoal, or black most days. The kind of woman you'd pass in a hallway without noticing. The invisible infrastructure that keeps things running. Except to Tess. She noticed me. Tess Harlow arrived 3 years ago, straight from business school, 27 years old with perfect white teeth and ambition radiating from every pore. She wore brightly colored dresses and heels that clicked purposefully down hallways. People remembered Tess. Our division head introduced her as the future and assigned her to learn under me. I was flattered. No one had ever considered me mentor material before. I'm just going to shadow you for a while, she said that first day, settling into the chair beside my desk. Learn how things really work. I showed her everything. The intricate supply chain networks I'd built over decades, the relationships with vendors that ran deeper than business, the handwritten notebook where I tracked the personal details of every supplier representative, their children's names, their hobbies, their birthdays, the small touches that turned business transactions into human connections. This is old school, she said, flipping through my notebook. Have you considered digitalizing all this? The personal touch matters in procurement, I told her. People remember how you make them feel. She nodded, but I caught the slight eye roll. Tess learned quickly. Within 6 months, she could recite our top vendor terms by memory. By year 2, she was negotiating smaller contracts on her own. I praised her to our division head. I recommended her for team lead when the position opened. You're too valuable where you are, Gwen. Our division head told me when I asked why I wasn't considered for the promotion myself. You're the institutional knowledge, the steady hand. I accepted this explanation. I'd always been the reliable one, never the star. And wasn't Tess shining so brightly? When she created digital dashboards tracking our vendor performance, the executive team praised her innovation. When she gave presentations, people leaned forward in their chairs. I sat in the back, nodding along, proud of my protege. The merger announcement came suddenly. Our competitor, Meridia Group, would join with Levine Industries. Redundancies would be eliminated. New organizational charts appeared in our inboxes. Don't worry, Tess assured me over lunch. Your experience is invaluable. No one knows procurement like you do. I believed her. 20 years of knowledge doesn't disappear overnight. Then came the day everything changed. The boardroom was packed. Executives from both companies sat around the table while the rest of us lined the walls. The CEO stood at the head, announcing the new structure. Leading our new combined procurement division will be Tess Harlow. Her innovative approach to vendor management impressed our integration team, and we believe she represents the forward-thinking leadership this merged company needs. Applause broke out. Tess walked to the front, radiant in a crimson dress. She thanked the leadership team for their trust. She spoke about modernization, streamlining, digital transformation. She never once looked at me. The reorganization memo arrived in my inbox an hour later. Most of my team was reassigned to various units under Tess. My position was eliminated. Instead, I was assigned to Historical Records Management, a fancy title for filing clerk. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, unable to move. People walked past, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to acknowledge the public execution of my career. Tess appeared at my desk at 5:30 p.m., after most had gone home. I wanted to explain the changes personally, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. Did you know? I asked. When we had lunch last week, did you already know you'd be taking over? She hesitated. The integration team approached me 2 weeks ago. I wanted to tell you, but they swore me to confidentiality. And my new role? Was that your idea too? Gwen, try to understand. This merger requires modernization. The board wants digital procurement systems, AI vendor matching, blockchain contract tracking. Your methods are, she paused, searching for a word. Outdated? I supplied. Traditional, she corrected, though her eyes said otherwise. The filing position keeps you with the company until retirement. I fought for that. How generous. She stood, smoothing her dress. Your new office is being prepared in the basement level. IT will move your computer tomorrow. You should take any personal items home tonight. I looked at the desk I'd sat behind for 12 years, the photo of my sister's family, the small jade plant I'd kept alive somehow, the handmade mug from my nephew. One question, I said as she turned to leave. Those supplier contracts I negotiated with Allied Materials, TechSource, and Weston Supply. Have you reviewed them? She waved dismissively. The legal team is handling all legacy agreements. We'll be moving to standardized digital contracts anyway. The next morning, I carried a cardboard box to the basement. My new office was a metal desk, wedged between filing cabinets in a room with no windows. My assignment was to organize 20 years of paper procurement records for eventual digitization. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 2 decades building something, only to be tasked with burying it. I started with the oldest files, from before my time, dusty folders from the 1990s, purchase orders, vendor evaluations. As I worked forward in time, I began recognizing my own handwriting, notes from my early years, the careful documentation of my professional life. By afternoon, I reached the section containing our major supplier agreements. The contracts with Allied Materials, TechSource, and Weston Supply were the crown jewels of our procurement department. Exclusive arrangements I'd negotiated and renegotiated over 15 years. These 3 suppliers alone accounted for 60% of our purchasing volume and provided specialized components no one else could match. I pulled the most recent renewal, signed just last year. Reading through the familiar terms, I reached page 34, section 12.3, the transfer clause I'd insisted on including in every renewal since 2008. In the event of corporate restructuring, merger, acquisition, or substantial reorganization, this agreement and all contained terms, conditions, pricing structures, and exclusive arrangements may only be transferred, modified, or terminated with the express written consent of the designated relationship manager, Gwen Ashton. My finger traced my name on the page. The clause had seemed like a formality when I'd added it, a way to ensure continuity of our supplier relationships during any corporate changes. Now it was something else entirely. I checked the other two contracts. The same clause appeared in each. Without my signature, these agreements couldn't be changed. And if improperly terminated, the penalty clauses would activate, millions in compensation payments, loss of all volume discounts, and a 2-year blackout period before renegotiation. For the first time since the merger announcement, I smiled. I sat in that basement for 3 days, organizing files by day and planning by night. No one checked on me. No one asked about my progress. I was truly invisible now. On the 4th day, the fire alarm blared. As I climbed the stairs with everyone else, I overheard snippets of conversation. Tess is presenting the new procurement strategy to the executive team today. She's been working all weekend on it. I heard she's cutting costs by 30% in the first quarter. In the parking lot, I positioned myself near a group from my former department. Jenny, who'd been my assistant for 5 years, noticed me and quickly looked away. "Do you know what's in Tess's presentation?" I asked casually. Jenny hesitated, then whispered, "She's terminating all existing supplier contracts. Says she can negotiate better terms with new vendors." The CEO is thrilled. The alarm was declared a false alert, and we returned inside. I went back to my basement, heart pounding. Tess was moving faster than I'd anticipated. She had no idea what she was about to do. I debated my next move. I could warn her about the contract clauses. That would be the honorable thing to do. Or I could wait and let events unfold naturally. That would be the human thing to do. I chose humanity. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Jenny, her voice tight with tension. "Gwen, you need to come upstairs right now. Conference room A. Tess is." She lowered her voice. "Just come." I took my time climbing the stairs. When I reached the main floor, I could feel the tension in the air. People stood in clusters, whispering. The door to conference room A was closed, but through the glass wall, I could see several people inside. Tess stood at the head of the table, hands planted firmly on its surface. Leaning forward, her face was flushed. Across from her sat our CEO, arms crossed. I smoothed my skirt, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, and knocked once before entering. The conversation stopped abruptly. 7 pairs of eyes turned to me. "You requested my presence?" I asked, looking at no one in particular. The CEO, Martin Parker, gestured to an empty chair. "Ms. Ashton, thank you for joining us. We seem to have encountered a situation with some of our supplier contracts." I sat down, folded my hands in my lap. "How can I help?" Tess remained standing, her knuckles white against the dark table. "It seems there's a clause in our agreements with Allied, TechSource, and Weston that requires your signature for any changes." I nodded. "Yes, Section 12.3. It's been in those contracts for over a decade. Standard language to ensure relationship continuity." "Standard?" Tessa's voice rose slightly. "Having contracts contingent on a single employee's approval is not standard." "Not a single employee," I corrected gently. "The designated relationship manager, which happens to be me." The head of legal cleared his throat. "Ms. Harlow has already notified these suppliers of our intent to terminate their agreements. They've responded by citing these clauses and threatening to invoke the penalty provisions if we proceed without your authorization." "I see," I said. "Can you tell us exactly what these penalty provisions entail?" asked Martin. I recited from memory. "Immediate termination of all volume discounts, retroactive to the beginning of the current contract year, financial penalties equal to 20% of the previous year's purchase volume, and a 2-year prohibition on new negotiations or agreements." The CFO, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "That would cost us approximately $18 million in immediate payments, plus an estimated $22 million in additional procurement costs over the next 2 years due to loss of the discounted pricing structure." The room fell silent. $40 million, Martin said finally, looking directly at Tess. "Your cost-cutting strategy would actually cost us $40 million. And Tess's composure cracked. How was I supposed to know about some obscure clause buried in contracts from 10 years ago? This is exactly the problem with how things were run before: archaic systems, hidden information, paper trails instead of digital management. "Perhaps," said Martin coolly, "you should have reviewed the contracts before announcing their termination." I watched Tess, remembering how she'd looked standing at my desk 4 days ago, how easily she'd dismissed me, how completely she'd erased my 20 years of work. "I can fix this," Tess said quickly. We just need Ms. Ashton to sign the transfer authorizations. Then we can proceed with the new vendor strategy. She turned to me, a tight smile on her face. You'll sign them, of course. For the good of the company. Everyone turned to look at me. The invisible woman, suddenly the most powerful person in the room. I'd need to review any proposed changes carefully, I said. These relationships took years to build. The terms were negotiated over multiple contract cycles. Any hasty changes could damage our supply chain irreparably. We don't have time for that, Tess insisted. The new vendors are expecting our business starting next month. Then I suggest you call them and explain the delay, I replied calmly. Martin studied me for a long moment. Ms. Ashton, would you be willing to oversee the transition of these supplier relationships? Ensure that any changes are made strategically? Before I could answer, Tess interrupted. With all due respect, sir, this is my department now. I can handle the supplier transition once the paperwork is signed. $40 million says otherwise, Martin replied sharply. He turned back to me. What would it take to get your cooperation on this matter? I felt a surge of power I'd never experienced before. In that moment, I could have demanded anything. My old job back, Tess's termination, a significant promotion. The temptation hung before me like a ripe fruit. Instead, I said, I'd need to be involved in all supplier negotiations going forward. Not just these three, but all major vendors. And I'd need the authority to approve or reject changes based on my assessment of their impact on our supply chain stability. That's my job, Tess protested. And you're welcome to continue doing it, I said. I'm not asking to take over procurement, just to serve as an advisor with final approval on major supplier changes. Think of it as a safety net. Martin considered this. What title would be appropriate for such a role? Strategic Procurement Advisor, I suggested. Reporting directly to you, not to the procurement department. The implications were clear. I would be Tess's equal in the hierarchy, not her subordinate. Her face darkened as she realized what was happening. That seems reasonable, Martin said. Legal will draw up the necessary paperwork. In the meantime, Ms. Harlow, I suggest you contact these suppliers and explain that our notification was premature. Ms. Ashton, please prepare a detailed analysis of these relationships and any recommendations for their future management. The meeting adjourned. As people filed out, Tess remained behind, waiting until we were alone. You planned this, she accused, her voice low. You knew about those clauses all along. I wrote those clauses, I corrected her. And if you'd bothered to read the contracts before announcing their termination, you would have known about them too. This isn't over, she said. You can't undermine me like this. I gathered my notepad and stood. I'm not undermining you, Tess. I'm saving you from a $40 million mistake. You should be thanking me. I walked out, feeling her glare on my back. In the hallway, people stepped aside as I passed, their expressions a mixture of surprise and new respect. The invisible woman, suddenly seen. My new office was assigned the next day, not in the basement, but on the executive floor, a corner space with windows overlooking the city. As maintenance moved in my desk and computer, Jenny appeared in the doorway, holding a small plant. Your jade plant, she said, placing it on the windowsill. I rescued it from your old desk before they cleared everything out. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. She lingered, shifting from foot to foot. I should have said something. When they demoted you, it wasn't right. It's okay, I told her. Sometimes things need to fall apart before they can be rebuilt properly. Does this mean you're coming back to procurement? Not exactly. I'll be working with procurement, but in an advisory capacity, directly under the CEO. Her eyes widened. Above Tess? Alongside her, I corrected, though we both knew the reality. As Jenny left, my phone rang. It was Martin. The paperwork for your new position is ready, he said, and I'd like you to join the executive meeting this afternoon. Tess is presenting her revised procurement strategy. I'll be there, I promised. The conference room felt different when I entered that afternoon, or perhaps I was different. I took a seat at the table rather than standing against the wall. Tess arrived last, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. Her presentation was polished, her slides professional. She outlined a modified approach to procurement modernization, digital systems, centralized vendor management, automated order processing. All good ideas, actually. But whenever she mentioned the three major suppliers, she glanced at me, her rhythm briefly interrupted. And what about cost savings? Asked the CFO. Your original plan promised 30% reduction in procurement costs. Tess hesitated. The initial targets have been adjusted to reflect market realities. We're now projecting 12% savings in year one, potentially increasing in subsequent years as we optimize our vendor relationships. Less than half your original projection, he noted. The original projection was based on incomplete information, she admitted reluctantly. After the meeting, I stopped Tess in the hallway. Your presentation was good. The digital initiatives will significantly improve efficiency. She regarded me warily. Not at all. They're genuinely good ideas. I would have implemented similar systems years ago if the budget had been available. Then why are you blocking my supplier changes? If you agree with modernization, I'm not blocking anything, I interrupted. I'm ensuring we don't sacrifice $40 million and critical supply chain stability for the sake of change. There's a difference. She studied me, her expression unreadable. What do you want, Gwen? Your old job back? My job? What's your endgame here? It was a fair question. What did I want? Revenge had seemed so simple in the basement, surrounded by the paper trail of my career. But standing here now, face to face with the woman who had tried to erase me, I realized my goals had evolved. I want recognition for the value I bring to this company, I said finally. I want respect for the relationships and systems I've built. And I want to ensure that 20 years of work isn't dismantled overnight by someone too arrogant to look before they leap. Her jaw tightened. You won't always have those contract clauses to hide behind. No, I agreed. Eventually, we'll renegotiate those agreements. But by then, everyone will understand exactly what I contribute to this organization, including you. I walked away, feeling her eyes on my back. The battle lines were drawn now, visible to us both, but only one of us knew what was coming next. The next month unfolded like a chess match. Tess and I circled each other cautiously, each making careful moves. My new position gave me surprising visibility. Executives who had never noticed me before now sought my input on supplier matters. Junior staff, who once reported to me, then avoided me during my basement exile, now stopped by my office with questions and updates. I used my authority sparingly, approving most of Tess's initiatives while suggesting minor modifications. This seemed to confuse her. She'd expected obstruction, not collaboration. Why are you being so reasonable? She asked after I approved her digital vendor portal project with only 2 small changes. Because it's a good idea, I replied honestly. I've never been against modernization, Tess, just against recklessness. She studied me, suspicious. You're planning something, I smiled. I'm doing my job, the same job I've always done, protecting this company's supply chain. As weeks passed, Tess grew bolder. She began scheduling supplier meetings without informing me. She implemented new procurement policies without seeking my review. Small boundary tests, seeing how I would respond. I let most of it slide. The policies were generally sound. The supplier meetings were with minor vendors not covered by my approval authority. I focused instead on rebuilding relationships with our 3 major suppliers who had been unsettled by Tess's premature termination notices. We were shocked, admitted Aaron from Allied Materials during lunch. 15 years of partnership, and suddenly a form letter saying we're out? If not for that clause you insisted on, we'd have lost millions. The new director is eager to make her mark, I explained. But she's learning. Is she? Aaron raised an eyebrow. Word is she's still shopping for replacement suppliers. Quietly. This was news to me. Are you certain? He nodded. One of our former employees now works for a competitor. Said she's been requesting capability assessments, pricing estimates, all very hush-hush. I thanked him for the information and returned to the office deep in thought. Tess was going behind my back, laying groundwork to replace our major suppliers once the contract transfer signatures were obtained. Clever, but predictable. That afternoon, Martin called me into his office. Tess was already there, looking triumphant. Gwen, Tess has raised some concerns about the approval process, Martin began. She feels it's creating bottlenecks in procurement operations. Tess jumped in. The digital transformation is being held back. Every change requires multiple reviews, signatures, meetings. We're losing momentum. I nodded, considering my response. What specific approvals have I delayed? She blinked, caught off guard. Well, the vendor portal had to be modified. 1. Which took me less than 24 hours to review and approve, I pointed out. The new purchase order system was approved the same day you submitted it. Martin looked between us. Is there a specific example of a significant delay, Tess? She shifted in her seat. It's the process itself. Having to submit everything for review creates extra work and uncertainty. I saw my opening. Martin, since my new role began, what's been the average time for my review and approval of procurement initiatives? He checked his tablet. According to the system logs, approximately 18 hours. And has any major initiative been rejected outright? No, he admitted, though several have been approved with modifications. I turned to Tess. Is 18 hours really an unacceptable delay for changes that impact $40 million supplier relationships? Her face flushed. That's not the point. I think it is precisely the point, I countered. This approval process was established because you attempted to terminate critical supplier contracts without understanding their terms. It exists to prevent costly mistakes, not to obstruct progress. Martin sighed. She's right, Tess. The approval times are reasonable. Unless you can provide specific examples of harmful delays, I see no reason to change the current arrangement. Tess left the meeting visibly seething. I remained behind. There's something else you should know, I told Martin, and shared what Aaron had told me about Tess's quiet search for replacement suppliers. His expression darkened. That directly contradicts what she's been reporting to me. She's assured me she's working to strengthen existing supplier relationships, not replace them. I believe she's hoping to present you with a fait accompli. New suppliers lined up, ready to take over the moment I can be persuaded or forced to sign the transfer authorizations. That would be extraordinarily risky, he noted. Yes, I agreed. For everyone involved. The following week, I was invited to a procurement department meeting for the first time since my demotion. The conference room fell silent when I entered. Tess stood at the front, her smile tight. Gwen will be joining us today to provide insight on our supplier relationships, she announced. As we all know, she has unique knowledge in this area. The presentation began smoothly. Tess outlined performance metrics, digital adoption rates, cost savings achieved so far. The team asked questions, which she answered confidently. I remained silent, observing. Then she reached the slide titled Future Supplier Strategy. As we continue modernizing, we need to evaluate whether our current major suppliers can meet our evolving needs, she said. I've conducted a preliminary market analysis of potential alternatives that could offer improved technology integration and more competitive pricing. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a comparison chart of our current suppliers versus potential replacements. The data seemed to show significant advantages with the new options. These alternatives could save us approximately 22% on component costs while providing superior digital integration capabilities, she concluded. The room was quiet, everyone glancing between Tess and me. She had thrown down the gauntlet publicly. May I ask a question? I said, breaking the silence. Of course, Tess replied with exaggerated politeness. These cost comparisons, I gestured to the screen, do they account for the volume discount structures in our current agreements? She hesitated. They're based on the published pricing provided by the alternative suppliers. Published pricing isn't what we pay, I pointed out. Our actual costs with Allied, TechSource, and Weston are significantly lower due to negotiated volume discounts. Did you use our actual costs in this comparison? I used the most recent invoiced prices, she said, her confidence wavering slightly. I nodded. Interesting. Because our agreements with these suppliers include tiered pricing that reduces costs as our annual volume increases. We're currently in the highest discount tier with all three, which only activates in the fourth quarter of each contract year. The team members looked confused. Tess's smile froze. So these comparisons, I continued, are using our highest price points of the year, not our average or final costs. That would significantly skew the results, wouldn't it? Before she could respond, I turned to the team. Could someone pull up our actual average cost per unit for the previous full year? That would give us a more accurate baseline for comparison. One of the analysts quickly accessed the data. When the numbers appeared on screen, they told a very different story. Our existing suppliers were actually 8% less expensive than the alternatives when using actual average costs. There seems to be a discrepancy in the analysis, I said gently. Perhaps we should revisit these comparisons with complete data before making recommendations. Tess's face had gone pale, then flushed with anger. This is exactly the problem, she snapped. Hiding behind complicated legacy agreements instead of embracing new opportunities. This is why we need to move forward with modern suppliers who offer transparent pricing. Transparency works both ways, I replied calmly. Our analysis should transparently represent true costs, not selectively chosen data points. The meeting dissolved into uncomfortable silence. Tess abruptly moved to the next topic, but the damage was done. Her credibility had been publicly undermined. Afterward, she cornered me in the hallway. You ambushed me in there. I asked factual questions about your presentation. I corrected her. That's my job. You're sabotaging me because you're bitter about losing your position, she hissed. This petty revenge needs to stop. I looked at her directly. Tess, this isn't revenge. This is consequences. You tried to discard 20 years of procurement knowledge as outdated without understanding its value. Now you're discovering what that knowledge is worth. The CEO sees your game, she countered. He knows you're using those contract clauses to hold on to power. It's only a matter of time before he finds a way around you. I just smiled. We'll see. That night, I couldn't sleep. Despite my confident exterior, Tess's words had struck a nerve. Was she right? Was Martin just tolerating me until he found a legal workaround for the contract clauses? My position was built on 3 supplier agreements. Once they expired or were legally circumvented, what then? I needed something more permanent. Something that would secure my place regardless of those specific contracts. The answer came to me at 3 a.m. It wasn't about the contracts themselves. It was about what they represented. Knowledge, relationships, experience. The very things Tess had dismissed as outdated. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Martin. I'd like to propose a new initiative, I told him. A supplier relationship management program that formalizes and extends what I've been doing individually for years. Go on, he said, intrigued. Our most valuable procurement asset isn't our contracts. It's our relationships with key suppliers. Those relationships have given us preferential pricing, priority during shortages, early access to innovations, but they're currently dependent on individual procurement officers. If those people leave, like you almost did, he noted. Exactly. We need to institutionalize that knowledge. Create a system that captures not just contract terms, but relationship histories, key contacts, negotiation backgrounds, 7 all the human elements that make these partnerships valuable. Martin leaned forward. And who would lead this program? Ideally, someone with extensive supplier relationship experience, I said. But it should be separate from day-to-day procurement operations. Those focus on transactions. This would focus on strategic partnerships. He nodded slowly. Write up a formal proposal. Include staffing requirements, reporting structure, expected outcomes. I want to see this on my desk tomorrow. 2 weeks later, Martin called an executive team meeting. Tess arrived last, taking the only remaining seat directly across from me. Before we begin the regular agenda, Martin announced, I want to share an exciting new development. The board has approved the creation of a strategic supplier relations division focused on maintaining and enhancing our most critical vendor partnerships. Murmurs of interest filled the room. This new division will work alongside procurement but will report directly to me. It will be responsible for managing our top-tier supplier relationships, ensuring we maximize value from these partnerships beyond mere pricing. Tess's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as she realized what was happening. I'm pleased to announce that Gwen Ashton will lead this new division as Chief of Strategic Supplier Relations, effective immediately. She'll be building a team to formalize and extend the relationship management approach that has saved this company millions over the years. Applause broke out around the table. I accepted the congratulations with a modest smile, watching Tess from the corner of my eye. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. Gwen, would you like to say a few words about your vision for the new division? Martin asked. I stood, feeling every eye in the room on me. The invisible woman, now commanding center stage. Thank you, Martin. I'm honored by this opportunity. For 20 years, I've believed that procurement is about more than transactions. It's about relationships. The trust we build with key suppliers translates directly to competitive advantage, whether through preferential pricing, priority allocation during shortages, or early access to innovations. I made eye contact with everyone around the table, lingering briefly on Tess. My first initiative will be to formalize these relationships through a new type of strategic partnership agreement. These agreements will extend beyond typical procurement contracts to include knowledge sharing, joint innovation projects, and mutual growth commitments. And importantly, there'll be company-to-company agreements, not dependent on any single individual. I paused, letting the implications sink in. This means our critical supplier relationships will be protected regardless of personnel changes in our company or theirs. Martin nodded approvingly. Exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. Tess, your procurement modernization will complement this perfectly, focusing on transactional efficiency while Gwen handles strategic relationships. Tess managed a tight smile. Of course, sounds innovative. After the meeting, she followed me back to my office. She closed the door behind her. Congratulations, she said, the word dripping with resentment. Very clever. Thank you, I replied simply. So this was your plan all along? Create a new division that takes the most valuable part of procurement out of my control? I set down my tablet and looked at her directly. No, Tess. My original plan was much simpler. I was going to wait until you'd thoroughly destroyed our supplier relationships, watch the resulting financial disaster, then step in to fix everything. Classic revenge scenario. Her eyes widened slightly. But then I realized something important. I continued. That approach would hurt the company I've dedicated 20 years to. It would hurt the people who work here. It would even hurt you in ways you don't deserve, despite what you did to me. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. After a moment's hesitation, she sat. This new division isn't about taking anything away from you, I explained. It's about creating something better for everyone. You get to focus on your strengths, digitization, process efficiency, transaction management. I focus on mine, strategic relationships, long-term partnerships, human connections. Together, we create a procurement function stronger than either of us could build alone. She stared at me, conflicted emotions playing across her face. Why would you want to work with me after what I did? Because unlike you, I don't confuse people's value with their age or their methods, I said quietly. You have extraordinary talents, Tess. You're brilliant at systems thinking, data analysis, and organizational change. I recognize that value, even when it comes in a package that tried to throw me away. The silence stretched between us. So what now? She finally asked. Now we do what we're both here to do, make this company better. You modernize procurement operations. I strengthen our strategic supplier relationships, and neither of us has to fail for the other to succeed. She stood, smoothing her dress in that familiar gesture. I underestimated you, Gwen. I won't make that mistake again. Good, I said with a genuine smile, because I never underestimated you. That's why I fought so hard. After she left, I walked to the window of my new office, looking out over the city. The revenge I'd originally planned, letting Tess crash and burn, would have been satisfying in the moment but ultimately hollow. This outcome was better. I hadn't just reclaimed my value, I'd transformed it into something greater, something permanent. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Drinks tonight to celebrate the new division? The team wants to toast the boss. I smiled. The invisible woman, now seen. The outdated employee, now leading innovation. The discarded mentor, now defining the future. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Building something so valuable that those who tried to discard you must instead recognize your worth, not because you demanded it, but because you proved it beyond any doubt. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside, remember this. Your value doesn't diminish just because someone fails to see it. Stand your ground, know your worth, and when the moment comes, don't just reclaim your place. Build a better one. Like this story? Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who underestimated you? I'd love to hear how you handled it.